Good morning and welcome to my YouTube channel. In my previous video, I discussed how you can determine, using VBA, how you can determine if a file exists or not. This is very important before you try to go and use files. And that way you can return, sensible messages to the user telling them, the file doesn't exist, please ensure it exists, things like that. Now in that video, I presented two approaches, the two most common approaches, using the Dir function and using FSO. After creating the video though, I did more digging, did some testing, and I substantially revised the support article on my blog. And as such, I added, I'm not quite sure, another 4 or 5 approaches. I got into doing some speed performance testing to truly see which approach was the optimal approach to actually use. Because it's nice to have all these options, but which ones should we be trying to use and which ones should we technically be avoiding? Today's video, I'm going along the same lines, but now instead of talking about files, testing the existence of files, I wanted to test the existence of a folder. How can we ensure a folder exists before we try to use it? So that's going to be the subject of today's discussion. Hi. My name is Daniel Pinault, if you don't already know me, and I'm a long time Microsoft Access MVP. Thank you for spending a couple minutes of your day with me. So let's dive in. How do we go about testing for the existence of a folder? Well, you're going to notice quite a few similarities here between testing for a file and testing for a folder. The code may change a little bit, but the basic concepts, the basic approaches, techniques are all very similar. So let's dive in. On my website, as you can see on the screen, I have an article for this. You can come here. We're going to discuss today these 6 techniques. I don't know, between the time you view this video and when it's released, perhaps I'll add some more, who knows. But currently, as of taping this video, I have 6 main approaches. Now, like I said, the first 2 are the common approaches. Okay, these are the ones we see typically in VBA. dir file system object, and that's glorious. But then I added some more. GetAttr, which is another thing that's baked directly into VBA, so it's there for us. Then I added 2 APIs, and then I decided I wanted to test WMI, Windows Management Instrumentation. It can basically do anything. It has access to pretty much everything, including the file system. So I want to see how it would work. And then, of course, get into speed testing all of these to see how they compare one to another, see which ones we should avoid at all costs, and which ones, those are the good ones to put into practice, into production. If you just scroll through, each one of these has a section where you will find the VBA code that you can simply copy paste into your solution, whatever it may be, Excel, Word, Access, Outlook, or some other, and just copy paste and you're ready to roll. I always try to include a header. You'll see there's an input variable section where I try to describe and explain a little bit what each one of these guys is, what you need to input, and then I usually try to have a usage section where I give an example or 2 of how they can be actually implemented in your VBA code. You'll also see sometimes here, well, the purpose is self-explanatory. I'll sometimes have references where I will elaborate which VBA reference libraries you have to include for the function to work in early binding. However, most of my code includes also late binding, so if you're using late binding, you don't even have that extra worry to even think about. Like I say, you just scroll through here, you find the one you like, copy paste it. Now, copy pasting on my site, if you're not already familiar, I'm using a common plugin that's used a lot, but if you go over any code block that appears, you'll get this a little toolbar that appears. You simply click on the first icon that is view source. You'll get a pop-up from here. You can copy paste the code and grab it and go paste it into your VBA module. So you can scroll through these, see the code, explore them, copy paste them, dissect them, just have fun with this. Everything you need is here. Okay? So with that being said, and before jumping to the next section, which is the speed testing, let's actually take a look at this actually in practice. So I have a very simple demo database. And what I've done here is I've copy pasted each one of those functions that I created into a module with the title associated to, so you know what's what. So if we go into the mod dir, well, here you're going to have that same function you saw on my website. So let's give it a whirl. Now, to make this work, let's create just a simple variable, C testing. So we'll call that our first directory, and then we'll create a second one just for some fun. And that would have been good had I relabeled it. So let's try that again. Directory 1, directory 2. Now, how do we use this? Like I said, you look at my header. It's always explained. So it's explained, and I have an example. So let's take this example here. We're going to put it here. I want to display the results right here in my immediate window. So I'm going to add that little question mark. And we're going to take our first variable that we defined. And we'll simply execute this. And as you can see, dir1 does exist. Now, if we come back up here and now try the second one, you'll get false. So as you can see, the code works perfectly. And you can then go and do similarly. Now what I have here, this is a bit of an exception. You'll see the same FSO twice, but in reality, one of them uses self-healing object variables, and the other version of the same code does not. If you're not familiar with self-healing object variables, there will be a link to my article on that, and I highly advise you to review it because it is a technique that truly can have some remarkable improvements on overall performance if you use things like FSO and other libraries, objects that you have to create. So if you're using a lot of automation and things like that, it really can be remarkable as to the performance boost you can get. If we come here and try that, you'll see that's false. If we try dir1, there you go. And you get into the show version of it, you'll see that it returns, it returned true, but if we run that a second time, it won't have to initialize the variable. So it is, even though to us, because of the speed of the computer I'm working on, it appears instantaneous, I guarantee you there was a difference in the timing that that operation actually took. If we switch it over to directory 2, there you go, it is false. And we can do this with every single one of the different functions I've provided on my site. And you're always going to get the same results, false and true, depending which directory you test. A quick side note, though, about all of these tests, most of the time when you're testing this, you also want to ensure that the actual path, the directory structure as a whole, if it doesn't exist, that it gets created. Now, if we just go back up to the top for 2 seconds, in my Dir function, I give a very simple example of creating it. Now, there are limitations to this approach, and as such, I just want to direct people's attention. If you want to test and then ensure it's created, if it doesn't exist, be sure to check out my article here about creating directory structures, multiple directory, nested directories, however you want to call it, because in it, I go over it, and you can look at the video too, but I give you 2 solutions to this. One is an API. So if you put in a structure such as this, and none of these folders exist, this guy will create them all one after the other in one shot. It's beautiful. The other approach, as I showed here, is I created a simple standalone VBA entirely, so no APIs, and it does the exact same thing. We just break our path, we split it into components, and then we iterate over them one by one, creating each directory as required. So just to mention, if you need to create the folder, should it not exist, check this article out, the YouTube video, because it will definitely be able to offer you some solutions. Now, the next thing I wanted to focus on, and the real, it's nice to have all these options available to us. If we just review quickly again, hey, we have these 6 options available to us. The question people always ask me then is, well, which one should I use? Now, obviously, each situation is different, but we can make some pretty easy assumptions to begin with, some hypotheses, and then through some simple testing, we can prove or disprove these assumptions. Now, right off the bat, my assumption, and also some of this just simply goes along with the testing I did with the FileExists testing, is the simple fact that things like FSO and WMI require objects. You're creating them, you're getting them, but you've got to access objects so you can actually perform the test. These typically are slower processes. Therefore, in my mind, from the get-go, FSO and WMI are going to be the techniques to avoid. So with that in mind, I set out to do the speed testing, and I did. As you can see here is a summary table of the testing. Now, I'm not going to go over all the details of it, but basically I created a module here with query performance counters to be able to use it as a timer, and I start it, and at the end I can calculate the elapsed time. And I created an array with all sorts of folders, and then for each technique I would iterate over all these folders one by one, perform the tests, calculate the elapsed time it took, and then push it to a table. This table of results then I could use to build up queries, to build up values, average times, minimums, maximums, etc. And I could pull out some beautiful charts. This one's pretty telling right off the bat. Yeah, WMI did not fare so well. What can I say about the testing? The testing has me perplexed in that a lot of the techniques bounced around. What do I mean by that? I was expecting to see, basically these three guys here always consecutively 1, 2, 3. They might change between 1, 2, 3 themselves, but I figured those would always be the three fastest. And I thought also the DIR would be probably in 4th position. What I found is they bounced around. DIR one time would be the fastest, then it would be dead last. FSO would be slow, and suddenly it'd be in the 1st position. So things bounced around. So I repeated the testing over and over and over to build a larger set of data to then average it out. And by doing that, this is what I ended up getting. So what I'm just warning you is if you go out today and do some type of speed testing, your answers may not jive with these ones here right off the bat. They may be similar, but there's no guarantee that this is going to be your number one approach. Perhaps you're going to get the GetAttr. Perhaps in your case, it's going to be the DIR. I don't know. But they bounced around a lot on the same computer, testing the exact same folders, and that's what blows my mind. I understand things may change by changing the input parameters of what we're actually testing, but I was keeping my data set to test always the same, on the same machine, the same hard drive, the same workload. The only thing that was happening is I was just rerunning this test over and over. So all that to say, things fluctuate a lot. So you take things with a grain of salt. What I can say with certainty, however, is pretty much, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, WMO, FSO were slow. DIR was typically on the slower end of things as well. What I'm going to be careful with here, the FSO with self-healing object variables, as you see here, perform decently, but I'm still not 100% convinced. What I am convinced, however, of is that these three here always seem to place usually in the top 3 positions, top 4 positions. So quite reliably, if I'm choosing a technique to use in a solution that I'm developing from this day forth, I'm looking at one of these 3 techniques. One thing, I'd be careful, maybe I might use the FSO self-healing object variables if I'm already using FSO for other things in the database. If it's already there, I've already taken the hit for the initial call, well then using the object that I have in memory doesn't hurt me as much as we see. It's minimal. But Yeah, and at the end of the day, we have two APIs here with declarations. Nothing wrong with them. They work well, as you can see. Technically, based on my averaging the values, this technically was my number one option. But you know what? Based on my file exist testing and now my folder exist testing, realistically, I think the answer is right there. Use GetAttr, and you can now test for files and folders natively in VBA, no APIs, no objects, and it runs fast. So that's basically the summary of it all. You have all your options here. You do as you see fit. In my experience, based on my testing, I think this is the guy I'm going to recommend moving forward. One thing I will mention about my testing, all my testing for this speed comparison was done locally. It was done on a couple different machines, but it was always done on their C drive, local to the machine. So I was never testing things over a LAN or over a WAN or any of those things. I should have tested, but I did not include anything on a OneDrive either, or Google Drive or Dropbox. So that should be another aspect to perhaps explore in an update to this article. We'll have to wait and see. But I hope this helps a few of you out there. I personally, up until very recently, wasn't even aware of this. And I was just doing research, trying to find information about one of these two APIs. I can't remember. And in the discussion, someone mentioned this. And then when I found out about it, I started doing some testing and looking into it, and it became quite obvious. I understood why he was recommending that approach. I'd never heard of it before that. So a great thing to be aware of. You've got lots of options. You pick and choose what suits your needs. But like I say, this is baked into VBA, so you just have to call it and use it. You've got functions now above in this article and the previous article. So I hope I helped a few of you out there. Perhaps you've learned a few things. And I'd also be curious, call out to you guys, are there any other methods that I'm completely missing here? Have I forgotten some other obvious candidates that I should be adding to this article and adding to the speed testing? I'd love to know if there are other really well-known approaches out there that I've omitted for some reason. Please drop me a comment below so I can look into them and try to make this article as complete as it can possibly be. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care and have a nice day.